Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hybrid service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Las Vegas. It is so wonderful to see you all present with us today, both virtually and in person. My name is Carrie Poole, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm serving as your worship associate this morning. Our worship leader this morning is Reverend Gordon, who uses he, him pronouns. If you have an announcement for after the service or a person you would like to have held up during Of Our Hearts, please provide it in writing before the start of the service. We have been transitioning from writing things in the chat to asking you to submit announcement and names electronically no later than Saturday at midnight. The links for submissions can be found in your Friday Flash, on the Facebook Hangout page, or on the website. If you are here in person, there are books back in the rear of the sanctuary where you can write names or announcements. During the transition, we will continue to read names from the chat and ask for announcements. In observance of the policies outlined by the UUA and CDC, we ask those who are face-to-face this morning to please keep your masks on and over your nose while in the church building. Due to health restrictions, we will not be singing during the in-person service. However, if you are at home, we encourage you to sing as loud as your housemates and neighbors will allow. As of now, we are following the UUA and public health guidelines and will be continuously updating our service guidelines as new information and policies are made available. If you would like to attend services in person, be on the lookout for the Friday Flash. There is a link you can click to RSVP. If you'd like to be sure that you are not on camera during the service, please sit towards the back of the sanctuary. Please refrain from using the chat or talking in the sanctuary until the end of the service, so as not to bring people out of a worshipful frame of mind. Having your chosen name and pronouns visible during service is an act of love and kindness. For those in the sanctuary, we encourage you to wear a name tag which includes your pronouns. For those in our virtual space, we ask that you edit your name to include your pronouns. Finally, we thank our computer techs, Keith and Jeff, for their continued hard work in ensuring great services both in person and online. And let's thank our host this morning, Irma. Let's get started with the ringing of the bell. It is wonderful to see you all here. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, whatever you believe about life, whichever spiritual path you travel, you are welcome here, and there is room for you in this religious community. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal faith rather than a creedal faith. We gather together, not around specific beliefs, but because of how we want to be in the world together. Together, we strive to create the beloved community here on earth where all people, cultures, and life can be at peace, surrounded by acceptance, compassion, and love. We believe that how we choose to live in the world is more important than what you believe about the world. Our sanctuary is filled with the diversity of people, and we are always growing and changing. Welcome. We are glad you are here.
When we gather together, we light the chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The chalice reminds us that we are connected to a much larger religious tradition that stretches out of the past, reaches around the world, and leads into our shared future. And join with me. We light the chalice as a reminder that together we are a beacon in the desert. May its light lead the way to love, acceptance, and justice as we strive for personal and societal transformation.
Thank you for that wonderful chalice lighting and for your welcoming words, Carrie. Hear these opening words. They come to us from Ramona Sawyer Barth and from the Journal of Liberal Religion. Our Unitarian Universalist women of the last centuries have had one virtue in common. They have been pioneers. These women who have literally made history were not outstanding persons who happened to be Unitarian or Universalist in their religion. Not at all. It was their dynamic religious liberalism which made them great. The Unitarian and Universalist religion was an ethical leaven, and the result was an era of feminine forming. May that spirit, may that legacy, may the strength of women continue to guide this Unitarian Universalist congregation and our faith worldwide.
The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Las Vegas is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuuvi Southern Paiute people. We are grateful for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to worship, learn, work, grow, and be in community with this land and her peoples. We encourage everyone present here to engage in continued learning about the indigenous peoples who continually work and live on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Moapa Band of the Paiutes, and about the historical and present realities of colonialism. It is important to recognize and appreciate the use of Southern Paiute land as part of our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive place for worship, spiritual enrichment, and exploration within the community.
Good morning. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and I only knew my mother's family as I was growing up in the Chicago area. 3 generations of Jewish atheists. From early childhood, my impression of most religions was they all seem to believe only our guys get to heaven, and it hasn't changed. When I was 40, midlife crisis age, I decided that I needed to find my biological father and find out about that half of my heritage. I found him, but he was an elder in the First Baptist Church of Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was a sort of epiphany for me, because if there is a God, he or she has a wicked sense of humor. My daddy, a Baptist elder, no wonder they got divorced. My first UU congregation was in Stamford, Connecticut. I was a typical definition of a UU, agnostic with children, but I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I think the UU religious education that my sons received was really an excellent overview of the major religions of the world, as well as the seven principles, seven then. And it gave them a good grounding. As they grew up, they found their own spiritual paths and went their own spiritual ways, unchurched. But I think they lived by the UU principles. So it took. However, there was something about Unitarian Universalism that stuck with me because I've been a member for over 50 years. I've been a member of 5 different congregations. I count this one twice because I moved to Las Vegas twice. And UUCLV in the 70s was a very different congregation from UUCLV in this millennium. Most of my finest friends are people that I've met in various UU congregations, especially this one. UU pagans put me in touch with my appreciation of the rhythms of the natural world. Social justice and the UU tradition of continuing to learn our entire lives are the 2 aspects of UU that I most appreciate. I think the food pantry is one of UUCLV's finest social actions because it's congruent for this neighborhood. And it even has a very positive public relations aspect. My all-time favorite UU curriculum has been Create Your Own Theology. That is where I finally learned what I really believe. And I'm still proud of the 11th commandment that my late husband Bob and I created. Everybody clean up their own mess, including corporations and countries. What I love most about being a UU is that we know there are many paths and we respect each other's path. Thank you for listening.
We will now ground ourselves in the present and honor those who with whom we share this time. I invite you to settle into your seat. Feel the chair holding your body. Imagine the earth holding you. Take in a comfortable breath. Exhale. Let the week roll off your shoulders and be present in this space. Please find a way to acknowledge those whom we share this time together. You might smile or place your hands over your heart and give a small wave. I invite you now to return to the larger circle. If you have someone you would like to be held up and you're here virtually, please add their name to the chat. Today we hold up yes, well, I'm going to add one. The people of Ukraine, and especially the people of Mariupol.
We also hold up Peggy Oakes. And we hold up the Yemeni people. And finally, we hold up the Peck family.
May we hold all those displaced or alone, and all these names spoken here, and all those held in the silence of our hearts, in love and compassion.
Sometimes our world needs silence. Maybe always silence is better than anything else. It allows the individual to go where their heart and their individual theology takes them. Sometimes people ought to say they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And whether you're a theist or a humanist, or you don't know what you are, you ought to be able to express your angst or your joy to the universe. Hear these words, meditation from a confession of faith by Anita True Pickett. Let us enter into a spirit of meditation as we hear this confession of faith. The divine self has created within its being many separate selves, that in each it may enfold a revealer and a beholder of its own perfection. Each of us are one of these separate selves, and you must follow your destiny. Every day is a romantic adventure. Every place you visit is holy ground. All people you meet are divine companions, seeking me, seeking you, as we seek them, that we may reveal the divine in our souls to one another and share the divine that we discover in our universe, to realize and reveal the divine within my soul, to see, serve, and worship the divine that is you in everything we do. This is my life. This is my faith. This is my religion. May the religion that you all have constructed for yourselves grant you peace, mercy, and compassion. Amen.
My script says that there would be a Board of Trustees member up here.
Yes. I didn't get the script, sorry.
That's okay. That's why I mentioned it.
And not just any Board of Trustee member, the fabulous, the one, the only.
Kim Tetlow, treasurer. As you may know, we have moved from a shortened pledge season into year-round giving. This allows us as a congregation to not be rushed or harried by an ask and a plea at one time of the year to fund the vision and mission of UUCLV. And it also means that we are expecting your pledge to continue until you let us know differently. And of course, you can change your pledge as you need to. Yesterday, we held our very successful food pantry, and the smiles on people's faces just warmed my heart. At the end of the day, an elder man rode up on a rickety old bike, and he had a large worn bag with Unfortunately, it was after we'd almost closed down, but someone went to our storeroom and found some canned goods and brought them out to him. And he was so grateful as he rode away, saying thank you to everyone he passed. And every month, our 50-50 donation benefits a different service group in our community. And I keep seeing delighted thank you letters. We also got television coverage of both our Vigil for Democracy on January 6th and also our successful blood drive earlier in March. We are increasing our family services with our OWL program and Let It Shine events. Our community is increasing its impact because so many of you have stepped up with support. Together, we are expanding and increasing our presence and impacting more and more so we can improve lives. So as you give generously this year, as you step up and provide your gifts, talents, and resources to our beloved congregation, please think in the forward, think ahead. Our shared ministry needs resources, so we may be more impactful. First, starting with what we do here, but also expansively in the ways we interact, befriend, engage, and provide a progressive spiritual voice in Clark County. This neighborhood we reside in, and even beyond, as we have friends all over the world and people who join us from afar on our Zoom program. Our board is trying its best. Our ministry is only powerful as the inputs and the outreach that we are provided. So please pledge as we continue to grow, and remember that a pledge is a plan and it can be canceled as circumstances change. If possible, you know what, there's inflation going on. It would be nice if you could give more if you could this year. Thank you very much.
We gather as a religious community to give each one of us a place where we can do the work of many. The offering supports the mission of the congregation to be a beacon of love and justice in the desert, and supports local organizations working to make our community a better place for all. The offering this month is shared with the Southern Nevada Adaptive Sports Foundation, Las Vegas Wheelchair Basketball Foundation. The link to donate your offering will be in the chat on Zoom, and there are boxes, actually baskets, in the back of our sanctuary where you can donate. And now, please join with me. With gratitude for the abundance in our own lives, we live for the life of this congregation and the benefit of the larger community.
Kathy, is she out there? She's out there with children. Kathy sends me somewhere between 5 and 10 stories each week. Sometimes the stories are 10 minutes long, and I don't think the attention span of the adults is up for that. Sometimes the stories are on point, but not where I intend to go with the sermon, and so I don't select them. Sometimes this minister is in such a quandary about the realities of this world being on fire, and it's not just the Ukraine, but the Ukraine is a serious fire. It's Yemen, it's Haiti, it's Ethiopia, it's China, it's everywhere. It's the city streets of our nation that are fraught with difficulties. So I don't always select the story. I wish I had the ability to magically make this picture go up on screen. Those of you at home may not be able to see it. Some of you here can see it, right? Some of you see that? On the UUA webpage, there's a page called Celebrating UU Women in History. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful history we have with the women that have shared, built, created, maintained, and now lead this association. This association is led by women. Let there be no mistakes about that. Religiosity in the United States is led by women. That's who are in the seats. That's who give the most. That's who volunteers the most. Women. I don't know why men are so absent. I'm calling you out. I'm calling men out. We've got a few good men, but not enough. We've got a lot of strong women here. And this denomination is being led by Susan Frederick Gray. And I'm going to tell you a little story, just a brief one, because I'm talkative. I'm long-winded. People say I sound like a Southerner. I'm from the south of Washington Heights, or better yet, Harlem Heights. That's what it was when George Washington and the British did battle in my neighborhood, Harlem Heights. Susan Frederick Gray was the minister of a congregation in Phoenix. I guess it's the big Phoenix congregation. She was doing wonderful work down at the border, making sure that UUs had the ability to go down to the border, even enter Mexico, see the plight of Mexican people and others as they tried to make their way across into the quote unquote promised land of the United States. We call it the promised land, don't we? Many of us. My grandparents were immigrants to this country. I'm not sure the promised land is what they ended up feeling this was, but they felt good about becoming citizens of the nation. Susan and I had some difficult words. I'm prone to have difficult words with people. I don't mince what I say what I mean as best I can. And this was the time of the killing of the young man in East St. Louis, or no, what's the name of the town? Ferguson, Missouri. I didn't know Susan was from Missouri. I was deeply troubled by what had happened to that young man. How that community allowed his body to lay on the sidewalk for hours and hours after he was long gone. I talked about the East St. Louis riot and why Marcus Garvey chose to stay in the United States. Marcus Garvey is the first human being credited with saying Black is beautiful. He lived at a time where everything negative was couched in Blackness. Marcus Garvey was traveling coast to coast raising money for his school in Jamaica as his train passed St. Louis, and he was witness to the massacre in East St. Louis. So I said to Susan, wow, you're from that hateful place? Huh, she was taken aback. How could you say such a thing? Well, the legacy of Missouri isn't a good one. Some of you might remember the Missouri Compromise. Missouri hasn't had a good history of race relations. Well, upon further reflection, there's really no place in these United States that has had a good history of race relations. But I was particularly upset with St. Louis and that community. And Susan, in her very adept way, her very kind ministerial way, her very professional capacity way, was able to take me down from a heightened state of upset and to remind me of the inherent worth and dignity of all the people. And yes, even those people that reside in Ferguson, St. Louis, East St. Louis. Somewhere down the road, she asked me to support her candidacy for the presidency of Unitarian Universalism. I was friends with all three candidates. A hard decision to make. How do you select one good candidate over another? I told her I would support her. I wouldn't go public. I didn't want my friends to be hurt by me. I'm proud of the job that Reverend Susan Frederick Gray does for our association. You should be too. We should invite her here before her days as president are over. Women's History Month, every day of the year ought to be Women's Day. And I'm gonna do my very best going forward, because I feel my grandmothers and my mother on my shoulders saying, boy, preach, tell them. Every day is a day we should thank our lucky stars for the women that have made our lives and this world better. That's my story. What y'all think? It's all right? Story about a woman. Kelly's got more. Woo, you got the text. Go.
Reverend Gordon showed you some pictures, and we must have been on the same wavelength, even though I didn't actually get in my reading right away, because I'm reading you the text that went with the pictures he showed you. Celebrating UU Women in History, the author is Lauren Wallace. March is Women's History Month, a time to reflect on the incredible and often overlooked contributions women have made throughout history. Many Unitarian, Universalist, and Unitarian Universalist women have not only shaped and led the UU faith, but they've also left an undeniable impact on history in general. Here are 10 of the countless influential women who changed the world for the better. Olympia Brown, who lived from 1835 to 1926, was one of the first women ministers whose ordination was recognized by any religious denomination. Sophia Lyons-Faugh, not here necessarily, but other UUs, I've seen that name many times on an RE wing. And that's because without Sophia Lyons-Faugh, UU religious education would not be what it is today. Faugh's revolutionized the way traditional religious education was taught, making complex theological concepts in history more accessible and exciting for a younger audience through storytelling, painting, and other forms of creativity and self-expression. Faugh's wrote 40 books and served as editor of the children's materials for the American Unitarian Association. Living to the age of 102, Faugh's never ceased in her quest for knowledge and innovation. Margaret Fuller, who lived from 1810 to 1850. Unitarian Margaret Fuller was an author, editor, critic, teacher, and feminist and a revolutionary who played a key role in the Transcendentalist movement. Many of her writings have been published by Skinner House Books and Beacon Press. She served as a war correspondent and wrote about poor conditions in prisons and mental hospitals for the New York Tribune. She is best known for writing the first American Manifesto for Women's Equality, Women of the 19th Century, published in 1845. Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin lived from 1900 to 1979. Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin was the first woman to receive tenure and the first to chair a department in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. An astronomer, she discovered that hydrogen is millions of times more abundant than any other element in the universe. Along with many more scientific breakthroughs, She also taught Sunday school at the First Parish in Lexington, Massachusetts. During a time when the sciences were even more dominated by men than they are today, her persistence and brilliance made incredible strides for women in the field. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, born in 1825 and lived to 1911, was a prolific writer, lecturer, and reformer. She wrote many books of poetry with strong anti-slavery themes, as well as a novel about African-American life during Reconstruction, republished by Beacon Press. A writer for the African Methodist Episcopal Church and member of the Unitarian Church, Watkins once refused to give up her seat on a Philadelphia streetcar. When the conductor refused to take her money at the end of her ride, she threw it on the floor and left. She was undoubtedly a courageous and powerful voice for justice. Viola Gragliuzzo was a UU layperson and mother of 5 children from Detroit, Michigan. Passionate about racial justice issues, she traveled to Selma, Alabama to participate in the marches of 1965. While transporting marchers in her car, she was shot and killed by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Today, she is remembered as a martyr for the civil rights movement and is honored along with Jimmy Lee Jackson and Reverend James Reed on the Selma Memorial plaque at UUA headquarters. Mary Livermore, who lived from 1820 to 1905, was a temperance and suffrage leader, popular lecturer, editor, and writer. She wrote about her experiences working as a nurse during the Civil War and noted contributions by other women throughout the period. She was president of the Massachusetts Women's Suffrage Association and held many other prominent positions, as well as helping to establish the Home for Aged Women and the Hospital for Women and Children. With a 25-year history of public speaking and a penchant for challenging authority, she certainly left her mark. Margaret Moseley, who lived from 1901 to 1997. UU Margaret Moseley was denied entrance to every nursing program in Boston because of her race. So instead, she became a civil rights activist. She founded a consumer cooperative and served on the board of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, as well as being a founding member of Freedom House, a leader of the anti-McCarthyism movement in the 50s. She helped form the NAACP chapters throughout Cape Cod. The second UU Community Cooperative House in Boston's Jamaica Plain neighborhood will be named for Moseley. Judith Sargent Murray, who lived from 1751 to 1820. Judith Sargent Murray was the first woman born in the US to have her plays performed professionally. She wrote numerous poems and essays on religion, politics, education, and the manners and customs of the day, illustrating her views through fictional stories. The wife of John Murray, one of the founders of American Universalism, she wrote one of the earliest published statements on women's rights, on the equality of the sexes. It was first published in 1790 and again in a feminist publication in 1973, showing how her impact spanned generations. Fannie Barrier Williams, who lived from 1855 to 1944. After moving to the South to teach and experiencing more discrimination than she had faced growing up in the North, Fannie Barrier Williams became passionate about speaking for the rights of African-American women. A Unitarian, she was one of the first leaders to identify housing segregation and limited employment opportunities as crucial issues for racial justice. Through her many speeches and co-founding of interracial organizations, she championed the rights of African Americans and worked to ensure their recognition and inclusion. there are just so many women, and there are some really good resources on the UUA website if you want to learn more. There's actually biographies of hundreds of UUs, both female and male. And while I was doing the research for this reading, I came across one that I had, who has touched my life personally, who I had no idea was a UU. Those of you of a pagan bent may have heard of Margot Adler. She's the writer of the 3 seminal books that myself as a young wannabe Wiccan priestess must have had on my shelf, Drawing Down the Moon. And I read that she was also the founder of Cups and a lifelong UU. There's a lot of us out there.
Great job, Carrie. You gave a good portion of my sermon. So that's, no. It may free me from the text and allow me to share something that's not so easily and readily accessible on the UUA website. Marjorie Bowens Wheatley. Any of you ever come across her? GA. She was a powerful Unitarian Universalist minister, a Philadelphia woman, a woman of West Indian ancestry. She lost her life far too young. Marjorie challenged me in so many ways. Marjorie once said in a public forum, "Ministry is what we do together, clergy and laity. It flows from a religious conviction that invites people to become more of themselves, more whole, as we give witness to a vision of a world transformed by our care." The clock be ticking, folks. Our care is at the very heart of what a service in a Women's Day month is really all about. Unitarian Universalist women have been groundbreakers. They've pushed the envelope, they knocked over tables, they've done what needs to be done to bring a feminine, an intellectual, a compassionate, a more dynamic form of ministry to our community. We are the only mainline denomination, mainline, what a fun word. Anyway, I know about the mainline in Philadelphia, the hoi polloi, oy vey, forget it. When I went there to speak, the police followed me, wondering why this Negro was driving around in one of those towns looking for a UU congregation. The main line, don't get me started. Women. The women that have changed our world. More than 100 years ago, in what was then the Beacon Religious Education Program, Ella Lyman Cabot wrote, "We sometimes speak as if the past were over and done with." In quotes, that past, that's out of date, that's ended, close quote. Yet try to obliterate your thoughts, all that is past. It is impossible, of course, because in so doing, we obliterate ourselves. Without the help of what we call the past, we can't live. Viola Luso? Am I saying it right? I've been around Italians my whole life. I wish my sister speaks Italian. Shame on me. I should have called her and asked her. Luso? Luso. What a figure. The media of this nation tried to defame her after she was murdered viciously. This nation went through a period of beating her up for having the audacity for leaving her husband and her 5 children and going to help the Negro cause. It's been a challenge these long years since she lost her life to place her on a platform that a hero deserves. She risked everything for a cause that was bigger than herself. We, the offspring, or we, the followers of a Unitarian Universalist faith that have had all of these great souls working and fighting and suffering and dying for the causes that make our Unitarian Universalism such a viable vehicle for theological, sociological, and spiritual engagement. This is not an accident, folks, that you sit here, that I stand here, that some of us are multi-generational that some of us are going to raise our children Unitarian Universalists, because this faith community provides the highest of ethical and moral standards by which to live by. We often get caught up in mince words. Oh, the 8th principle, it didn't cover everything possible, and how can we adopt the 8th principle? The same problem existed when they adopted those first 7 principles. They fought and dissected, and our faith community, with women like Judith Sargent Murray. Did I say Murray? Judith Sargent Murray. Yeah, she was married to John Murray. Who's John Murray? The first minister to preach a Universalist sermon in North America. And Judith Sargent Murray was his muse. She was more than his muse. She gave him the will to go forward. A Methodist minister, John Murray, left England for the shores of America, hoping to never preach again, hoping to never do anything within spirituality. His wife and children dead. He had spent time in debtor's prison. But upon finding his way to our shores, to New Jersey, there's a Unitarian Universalist campsite, Murray Grove in Jersey. If you're there sometime, go see it. The chapel that John Murray preached in is long gone, but the legacy is still there. The spirit is there. But Judith, a cultured and politically aware woman, helped this Englishman find his way to help create the Universalist Church in America. And the Universalists were at one point the 4th largest denomination in America. See, some of you are come-outers of Christianity and all that hellfire and brimstone. Well, you can thank the Universalists for getting rid of hellfire and brimstone. You can thank Origen, a 3rd century, somebody will call me on this, at one time saint of the Catholic Church, who gave the theological underpinning to Universalism. Judith Sargent Murray, brilliant. She became one of the founders of our faith. She educated herself. She went on to do great things. Margaret Fuller, you know her name? Margaret Fuller is worth a PhD. Dive into Margaret Fuller if you don't know her. Her friends were a who's who of the Boston elite. Margaret Fuller helped change the world. If you don't know, I believe we have a book in our library written by Reverend Dr. Dorothy Mae Emerson, all about women in our ministry. I believe that text is in there. If you haven't read it, borrow it today. Don't all bum rush the library. We need to have multiple copies of the text. Sometimes I wish I was Baptist, then I could keep you for 2 or 3 hours. I know you all don't go along with that. Heck, the 10 or 15 minutes I keep you over sometimes, if you could see those eyes rolling as I gaze out upon you. The thing I want to leave you with comes to us from a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, someone that I have adored for over 25 years, the Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper. She wrote a short piece as she was addressing our association some years ago. Let me share a little bit of what she wrote. Alice Walker writes, "We are a people. A people don't throw away their geniuses. If they do, it is our duty as witnesses for the future to collect them again for the sake of our children, if necessary, bone by bone." There are more stories in our Unitarian Universalist narrative about women of strength and substance that has never come to light. I mentioned to you the comedian Dave Chappelle before. I told you that his mother, Reverend Dr. Yvonne Seon, was the first Black woman to be ordained as a Unitarian Universalist minister. It had to come, Dave Chappelle's mind had to come from a Unitarian Universalist household. That brother's off the hook. I want to acknowledge that Black women, and there's a list of them that I want you to learn about, but not today. I want to acknowledge that Black women were not the first women of color to be fellowshipped by the Unitarian Universalist Association. The Reverend Diane Ayakawa, please, if my Japanese friends are listening, don't jump me. Ayakawa. She was the senior minister of the community church in Connecticut and was fellowshipped and ordained in 1978. There are stories we should know. Like we know Olympia Brown. We should also know the stories of Egbert Ethelred Brown. Well, why do I call him? Well, he's my granduncle. So of course, the first Black Unitarian minister is my kin. And I'm always gonna make sure y'all are aware of that. Multiple generations of this faith ordained in 1910. We owe a debt of gratitude to the women that gave birth to these people that we ought to know about. We owe a debt of gratitude to those women, those sages, those heroes, let's not genderize it, those heroes that make this life of ours better. In 1999, Reverend Adele Penniman Smith, who was the second Black female in our ministry, she went into search in 1999. Reverend Adele got placed and had a long, powerful ministry. Her daughter now addresses the United Nations. Her daughter runs a farm outside of Albany, New York, called Soul Fired Farm. It teaches about organic and ecologically good farming practices. You see, what you women do is build things. presidents that build things, women of distinction, treasurers that give countless hours of their life to manage our books, women who sit in this front pew who try to build a children and family-centered program so we won't die someday because we're old. And we need young families and young people to join us in this Unitarian Universalist community. My granddaughter has been raised coming to UU functions all 17 years of her life. But what I'll remember most about her, whether she stays UU or not, is when I stepped out of the chapel at Harlem Hospital to tend to an emergency, a 6-year-old girl got up from a seat in the chapel and got behind the pulpit and started to lead them in song. Spirit of life, come to me, she sang with them, and she signed it because my daughter is deaf. And everybody was in amazement at what a UU child can do. We owe it to the future and to this present to strengthen every capability and possibility that the females of Clark County can build and do, and let them know that a Unitarian Universalist congregation was behind them. Scholarship, mentoring, junior achievement, what business did you work? What corporation are you connected to? Let's get the young girls of this community engaged with things that will make them the leaders they're called to be. That's enough for me. Blessed be. Amen. And when the women lead, us men will follow. Amen. I want to sing. Vi Higginson, a woman in New York, had a show off Broadway for about 20 years called Mama, I Want to Sing. Did it ever tour Vegas? Need to bring it here. This little girl, Mama, I want to sing. Ooh, really breaking down the house. Here are these closing words. A wise person once said, take from the past, not its ashes, but its fire. May we feel the fire of inspiration of Unitarian Universalist women, knowing that our presence forms a bridge between the past and the future. Soon we will extinguish this chalice. May we take the flame of fire with us. May it empower us to act boldly for justice in a world that desperately needs it. And may it burn brightly in our lives, in the life of this congregation, as a beacon here in the desert and for all future generations to see. Amen.
We release that which was called with love and gratitude, and we extinguish the flame, but not our commitment to being a beacon in the desert. This burns brightly until we gather again.
Thank you.